Okay, come on in and have a little laugh. What we're doing, I'm talking outside the tent now. What we're doing is telling joyous stories from the front line of the activist world. Joyous. The joy in insurrection, ladies and gentlemen. Come and make yourselves comfortable. Roll up, roll up. We thought it would be lovely to have a session where it's very heavy. The Speakers Forum has the best speakers, and it's often very heavy what gets discussed in here. And often what gets lost is the joy, right? The joy of direct action, the joy of creative ways of taking action. That often gets lost because in this tent we're talking about why we're taking action and we're sharing skills so other people do. So we thought it'd be nice to have a session where we share we make you laugh, or at least make you smile widely. And then we thought, wouldn't it be lovely if we went from old to new, from older activists telling stories back from the 80s and 90s to the younger activists who are telling stuff about what happened last week. Now, I don't know, by looking at the panel, if you can tell which categories we fall into. All right, if you really squint, you will have on my left-hand side one of my joyous new hero friends, Louis from Just a Boil, ladies and gentlemen. Hey! And boy, does he have some tales to tell. Hey! On my right, ladies and gentlemen, which is your left, I have Shane Collins back from Reclaim the Streets days until now. How about that? He helps run the Speakers Forum here and at Glastonbury. He's a legend for so many different delicious reasons. My name is Jamie Kelsey Fry. I go back to... Hey! Why are you clapping? You don't know what I've done. I go back... so my tales will be coming more from the 90s and the early part of 21st century. So we've got quite a span, and we haven't planned anything. All we've done is go, right, we'll just write a little list of good stories to tell. And our aim is to make you smile widely, okay? Are you ready? On your marks, get set, go. So shall we start with old or new? Old, let's go, old. Shaney, you take it away then, Daddy-o.
Oh, my God. Okay, so I didn't actually make a list, but just thinking now, a few of the sort of assistance, inadvertent assistance, let's say, we had from the government to do with the formation of Reclaim the Streets. Just in case people are not familiar, Reclaim the Streets started about 1992. There was a load of us who got arrested at Twyford Down and were banned from going anywhere within 2 miles of Twyford Down, had to sign on at the police station, all this sort of thing. We were feeling pretty shit because all our mates were down there getting done over by security and not having a very nice time. So we thought, let's do something urban-based about fighting car culture. Because obviously, Twyford Down was about more motorways, climate change, and we wanted to bring a focus to air pollution in particular in the city as well as climate change. So around about that time, we came across an empty factory in Brixton called Cool Tan Suntan Lotion, which was duly squatted and turned it into an art venue with parties and exhibitions every 6 weeks. And that's about the time Reclaim the Street started, when we moved into the old Dole office on Cold Harbour Lane in Brixton. Some of you may remember that. And in that old Dole office, there was a load of old Dole equipment, including thousands and thousands of DHSS prepaid envelopes. You may remember them. So I have to report that the first 3 or 4 Reclaim the Streets mail-outs on paper by post in those days were entirely funded by the government.
That's wicked. We'll hear more about Reclaim the Streets. Put your hands up if you've heard of Reclaim the Streets, actually. All right, okay. Quite a lot of older people in the room. That's magic. So that was in 1992. Louis, I'm dying to ask you, when were you born, man?
Yeah, 2000.
2000. Come on, brilliant. So we're going to go to new. Hello, Lorna. We're going to go to news, so hit us with one of your many stories, man.
Right, well, I was asked to do this panel, and I think about what stories I wanted to tell. I could talk about locking to a goalpost at a football match. I could talk to gluing to a Van Gogh painting. I could talk about running on a Formula One track. You've probably already heard those ones, so I think why don't we go for going on the run from police and getting tackled? That's a fun one. So this was back in the Animal Rebellion days, the Impossible Rebellion. So we were fucking up London for 2 weeks, pissing everybody off. Brilliant fun. And so on the Tuesday, I was glued to a McDonald's order screen, and I just get tackled by a police officer immediately while still glued on. And then 2 days later, I'm in Buckingham Palace Fountain, dyeing it all red with fake blood and that. Again, completely tackled by a police officer. Second time in the week. Get out of the police station at, I think, 5 a.m. Go back to camp, and at midday, I'm back in central London at another rally. I had bail conditions not to be there, so complete head-to-toe disguise, different glasses, different mask, everything. And I was there for about 2 minutes before I get a tap on my shoulder from my mate Tony. He's like, Louis, they're after you, run. So I just fucking start sprinting through this crowd. And there's speeches going on outside the Bank of England. There's a massive crowd. Police are like, 2 officers are like running after me, knocking people over. Protesters are going flying. I'm sort of ducking under banners and stuff. I run into the underground station. I see the barrier ahead of me. I'm like, this is going to be brilliant. I absolutely got this. Try leaping it. Trip, eat shit. Get jumped on by another police officer if, twice in a week isn't enough. I was like, how did you recognise me? Because I was full disguise. I thought there's no chance they find me. And they found me within 2 minutes. It was like, mate, you were front page of the Metro this morning. I saw it on my way to work, and I had no fucking clue.
You finished with that one?
Yeah.
Can I just check? You didn't actually eat shit. You didn't land in the dictionary. No, you didn't. Okay. I just like the way that Louis just quickly introduced himself and brushed past. Well, you probably all know about myself, gluing myself to Van Gogh, running on the Newcastle and Everton football game. What was the third one you just lightly said?
Formula One track.
Formula One track. Shutting
during
down
the
all
race.
Refineries. During the race, yeah. So I think that deserves some sort of cheer. Come on!
Hey!
What is he like?
Hey!
All right, so I'm going to give you a fancy pants story, right? So I didn't do this one myself, but I actually teach this stuff. I used to be a secondary school teacher, and I used to tell all the teenagers all these stories. They just used to love it. And this one wins every time. So some of you, I'll talk about the Yes Men later, but so you'll hear about the Yes Men. But this is one of the original gigs that people who are the Yes Men went on to become the Yes Men, right? Anyway. So this is called culture. Oh, it's a crass T-shirt. Can't go wrong with that. This is called culture jamming, if you want to use the fancy language, right? And so culture jamming is recognising how the mainstream media works and then playing it at its own game, right? So very often, it's less so today, but in the 80s and 90s, you'd have the news, and it's all these, news cycle items, usually rather depressing and alarming and shocking. And what they used to do is then end the news reporting with a funny story, okay? Like, here is a cat that's made friends with a fox, or something like that, right? So these people, they knew what to do. They wanted to hit that spot. So this is the tale of the Barbie Liberation Organisation. And I think that's quite apposite, because, look at me saying apposite at this time of the day. Because Barbie's out and about at the moment, apparently. So they did reverse shoplifting. So what they did, and this is over in the States, right? So in the States, Action Man is called G.I. Joe, right? So they did reverse shoplifting. What they did was they bought, right, something like 500 G.I. Joes, 500 Barbies, but they're the ones where you pull the string and it talks, right? So they took them home and they reversed the voice boxes. So Barbie had G.I. Joe, right? And G.I. Joe had Barbie, yeah? And then they did reverse shoplifting. They put them in the shops, toy shops across America, right? But with a little message at the bottom. And the little message at the bottom said, we are the Barbie Liberation Organisation, and we have done this because, right? So it's really clever. It ended up on the news items across the states, and this is what happened. So you're looking at the news in Michigan, and there's a boy looking really upset, right? And I bought G.I. Joe. Look what happens. He pulls the string, you know, and G.I. Joe, all this butchness is going, let's plan the perfect wedding. Let's plan the perfect wedding. Let's go shopping, right? And then same thing, you know, in another news item, you've got little girls in tears. I bought Barbie. And you pull the string, there's like little Barbie, you know, and it's going, what's it? Eat lead, Cobra. You know, and it's like, really eat lead, Cobra. You know, and she's got a little handbag. But it's genius bit of culture jamming, because then they read out the bit at the bottom, right? And the bit at the bottom said, we have done this because, and they had all the statistics about, you know, in the kind of early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, you know, that the rise in sort of bulimia and anorexia and body shaming and sort of the controlling of our youth's bodies was beginning through kind of consumerism, was having a really big impact on our young. And also we're doing this because, and it's about, you know, girls are being told you should just be interested in shopping and getting married, and boys are being told you should be interested in, you know, killing people and being butch, you know. But that got read out, and it's just a lovely little nugget of, you know, when you're creative and joyous, you can actually, you know, that reached millions and millions of people across the States, you know. So let's hear it for the Barbie Liberation Organisation. All right. If can you hear us? Well, you probably can hear me at the back, but can you hear these two at the back?
Yeah.
You can? Great. Okay. Good. Yeah. Come on in, folks. If you're outside, because we haven't got any amplification at the moment, so come and take a seat. Right. We're going back in time to Shane. He's had enough time to think up another doozy for you. So over to you, Mr. Collins.
Okay, so I want to tell you a story about linking three things, okay? Britain's drop in CO2 emissions, the Big Green Gathering, and an undercover copper. All right? So many of you, when you listen to the news, you hear the government saying, oh yeah, Britain's energy emissions have dropped 40% on 1990 levels, okay? Which they have. And do we know why that is? Because we've got rid of coal, basically. So let's go back to 2008, I think it was, Labour government considering a new generation of 11 coal-fired power stations, okay, because all the ones built in the 50s were getting too inefficient. They were seriously considering, as I say, 11 new coal-fired power stations, okay? In reaction to that, lots of people, loads of different campaigners were involved in it, and in particular loads of direct action people, the Camp for Climate Action. Anybody remember the Camp for Climate Action? Yes, it was a sort of spin-off of one of the many spin-offs of Reclaim the Streets when it got completely infiltrated and impossible to do anything. People went into anti-GM foods, and then the Camp for Climate Action. So the Camp for Climate Action was amazingly successful. We had the Kingsnorth occupation of all around Kingsnorth Power Station for a week. It really got the news, and it linked in with all the campaigning that had been going on. And eventually, after a lot of pressure, Ed Miliband, who was then the Environment Secretary, said, OK, no new coal-fired power stations unless they're 25% carbon capture and storage, which in 2008 wasn't going to happen, and it still isn't going to happen now, because as you probably know, carbon capture and storage is rather like one of those things like nuclear fusion. It's always sort of 10 years and a few billion more funding down the road. Okay, so we put pressure on direct action, campaigning, Labour changed their mind. That is why Britain's emissions have dropped, because we don't use coal anymore. Okay. So Camp for Climate Action were getting very successful. They were also at Drax, and they're also at Heathrow, and stopped the new Heathrow expansion back in the sort of noughties. How was Camp for Climate Action funded? At the Green Gathering, the Last Chance Saloon bar was generating money. Its job was to raise money for the Camp for Climate Action, and it was very successful. Back in the sort of 2007, we raised about 20 grand for the Camp for Climate Action, which, you know, then was an awful lot of money. It still is, but it was a lot more then. The energy companies didn't like this because we were influencing policy very successfully. The government didn't like this because he was a bunch of people who didn't have suits on changing things.
Yeah, right on.
So And we thought the bar's doing very well. How is this? It transpired, we didn't find this out till 3 or 4 years later, that Mark Kennedy, or Flash as he was known at the time, who helped run the bar, and you can always spot an undercover copper. A, they have a van. B, they're incredibly efficient and do shit. And C, they have a credit card and can pay for things. And the fourth thing is, every now and then they have to go off for a strange job. Yeah. And they're freelance and we never quite figure out where they are. So, 2009, when the Big Green Gathering's last attempt to happen, on the Friday before we were due to open on the Wednesday, the police at 6 o'clock Friday evening give us a court order saying, see you in court 10 a.m. Monday morning in the Strand. You haven't, this road closure license wasn't issued, a sign wasn't put up in the road, of which the Green Gathering directors at the time had been in touch with the correct person at Mendip Highways. That was going to be done the next morning. We reckon pressure was put on that council officer by the police. The sign didn't go up. So the Green Gathering was faced with a big dilemma. Not only the farmer was named on the injunction, Andy Weir from Fernhill Farm, but all the directors were named on the injunction. That means that if it went ahead or if it was challenged in court, all those individuals would be personally liable. So we gave in. We were told by the lawyers that we didn't have a chance. Indeed, the sign hadn't gone up and they would likely win in court. And so we had to cave in. The old Big Green Gathering went bust in 2009, owing about £300,000. A lot of people's employment was screwed up. A lot of small businesses involved in festivals lost a load of money. Transpired, as I say, a few years later that Mark Kennedy was helping running the bar. And obviously, as an undercover copper, he would report back twice a day to his handler with exactly what was going on, which is why the police knew on Friday at 6 p.m, when all the infrastructure had been paid for, that we were at our most difficult time. But one thing that was paid for was all the beer for the bar. And it turned out, again, that this was a gift from the police because Mark Kennedy, Flash's Metropolitan Police credit card, had paid for all the beer. But, it's not a great story, but it did lead to us forming up the Green Gathering Community Interest Company 2 years later in 2011 and coming back. And, it was really difficult the first 3 years. We lost money. People didn't get paid as they should have done. But from year 4 onwards, this is year 11, we're on an even keel. We sometimes make money. We never lose it. We generally break even. And any money we do make goes to the Green Gathering charity, which then funds educational things. And I'm glad to say that last year was a really good year. We raised about £30,000 for the charity, who are, spending it on good stuff, some of which you see around the festival. So that's...
Let's go forward in time.
Yes.
Forward in time to Louis McKechnie.
All right, so I'm going to give all of you 2 choices, what you want to hear. Choice number 1, locking my neck to a goalpost and running on a Formula 1 track. Or choice number 2, running from a police helicopter into an oil station, into an oil terminal and occupying it for 40 hours.
They're both good.
2? All right. 2 is the right choice. I've got to say, I didn't want to tell the first one. All right, so this was April last year. This was the first wave of Just Stop Oil.
This is good.
We'd been going a few days. I think I'd been arrested surfing an oil tanker like 2 days before this. But I got out of the police station. I was like, all right, where's the nearest block team? What are we hitting? So I go to the safe house. They're like, all right, we leave in I got there at 10 p.m. They were like, all right, we leave at 5 a.m. I was like, fuck's sake. Haven't slept well in weeks. Would have been nice to have a bit of a line, but you go with what you got. So we all get in the van. We start driving to the oil terminal, and overhead we start hearing this thumping from a helicopter. We're like, fuck. And instantly we get pulled over by a police car. And the police car somehow, I don't know how the driver did this, even though I was sitting next to this driver, at this point the most known climate activist in the country, looking straight ahead, not looking at police. Driver somehow talks to police officer and that we're not the protesters that are going to go shut down the oil terminals and haven't been for the last week. So we head on. Police helicopter still kind of circling around us. And so we get to the oil terminal. We're about a 10-minute walk on a footpath away. We get out. We start walking. The helicopter seems a little bit more interested now. And so we just fucking start sprinting down this hill. It was so muddy. I think I fell over. I was covered in mud. We got to a fence. The police helicopter was really on us now. And security with a dog was at the other side of the fence, like trying to scare us off. But we were barreling over this fence, right? And at this point, half of us over the fence, we started to hear police radios. They were coming in by force from the other side. But at this point, we were already over the fence. We only had to worry about security and a dog. So we were sprinting into this oil terminal. Police trying and failing to climb a fence. I don't know what they cover you in basic training, if it's eating donuts or what. But they really, they were not very good at it. So we get into this oil terminal. The oil workers are like, "Oi, the protesters are here!" We're climbing up this pipework, climbing on these swinging beams or whatever. Really not safe, but yeah, we ended up all right. Got up there, stole a bunch of. There was this construction going on next door, and we stole a shit ton of their wooden planks because these pipes, they're not flat. Like if you want to stay up there, you're not going to be able to sleep. So we stole all of this construction material, took it up to the pipeline. We were maybe 20 meters up, hanging out there for about 40 hours. Of course, built a little nest out of the wood we stole. Had a brilliant time. At one point we ran out of water and I was bartering 3 of my friends for a crate of water bottles from the police. To this day, Hannah will not let me live down that she is worth about half a bottle of water to me. But eventually, the police got us down after about 40 hours, and they never ended up fulfilling their part of the deal of giving me a crate of water for 3 of my friends. So, not that I hold a grudge against the Metropolitan Police or anything, but that was a brilliant 40 hours. And I think in that time we cost Shell about £750 million. Because this facility makes £500 million a day. We shut it down for 40 hours.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
Rock and roll!
Punchline to that one because I was the last one over that ladder.
Oh, wow.
So Louis and everybody got in and they got across. They went right, if I'm right, over that ladder. And I'm the last one over the ladder, me and my buddy. And my jacket got caught on the spike.
No.
And it's up 12 foot up, dangling. and I could see the sirens coming. See the blue lights coming. And all my mates had gone that way. And the guy on the other side of the ladder, he climbed up and he unhooked me. I fell to the ground and he went, "They've gone right, you run left." I ran left, I got tackled within 30 seconds.
What's his name?
Gave them time to get
Hooray! Decoy runner.
How's this going? It's going all right, yeah? Good. Lots of smiles, laughter. Joyous. We might not be making any money out of what we're doing, but we're having a lot of joy. It's a good way to be alive, in my opinion. Being 59, I'm having a good time. I'm skint, but I love this life. Okay, so one of the things, I'm trying to shape this in an intelligent way, which is quite hard work, but so I've mentioned to you culture jamming, right? I think another angle of action is when you think you respond to the moment. And so I'm going to will I? Yeah, I will. As long as we've got time for another one. Yeah, okay. So this is responding to the bloody moment, right? So we used to Reclaim the Streets were absolutely awesome, right? And there was a while back there in the 90s and early noughties where every May Day there would be a lot of stuff happening, right? You go to Clerkenwell Green and there'll be, the original sort of unions, workers celebration in Clerkenwell Green. But very often gangs related to Reclaim the Streets, they'll be pulling off something groovy as well, right? Sorry, I just said groovy, apologise. And there was this brilliant year, one year, which was called guerrilla gardening. All right, guerrilla gardening. We are going to change Parliament Square into a garden, a beautiful garden. So it's a lovely idea, isn't it? It's like just reminding city dwellers, grow stuff, man. We're going to have to grow stuff anyway. Everything's collapsing. Let's learn to grow stuff. So it's a great idea. But the state went, well, we will stymie these rebels. And so they put massive hoses of water. They hosed down Parliament Square all night, all bloody night. So you arrive and it's sort of marshy like this, right? So what do you do? What do you do? And then one clever fella went, oh, look at this. He found out that you can actually cut the turf just with your hand. It's so stodgy. And there you go. I remember seeing this before, smarty phones. So I wish someone had filmed it, is what I'm saying. So basically, as soon as he worked that out, everyone went, yeah! So we're in a nice, organised way, we were slicing the grass like this, right? And then rolling it off the square and turned the road in front of Big Ben into a lawn and played football on it, right? Which was just so cool. And it's at moments like this you go, oh, I'm so in the right place. There's very often with activism, there's that, the kind of worthiness or, this is political and no, it's fucking hysterical and it's great and it's joyous, which was what Reclaim the Streets was. If you stopped us, I was just a massive fan, right? But if you'd stopped us when we're doing Reclaim the Streets, as we're running onto a main road and turning it into a sound system and suddenly there's a sandpit for the kids, and you say, oh, you crazy activist, I would go, am I? This is just fucking great. That's why we're doing it, right? So that one with Parliament Square, the quick thinking, let's turn it into a lawn, wonderful. And the older people in the room, you remember that actual one ended with Winston Churchill having a green Mohican. So once we worked out you can do whatever you want with this lawn, someone said, he needs a fucking Mohican. And they climbed up and did that. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, going back in time to Shane Collins.
So anybody remember Reclaim the Streets at the M41 in Shepherd's Bush?
Oh, only a couple.
Okay, so Dave, yes, of course. Dave, one of the original founders of Reclaim the Streets Action Network when we sat around the table in Quaker Meeting House, Dave Morris, London Greenpeace. An awful lot more stories probably to come there as well. Reclaim the Streets, what we were trying to do was marry up the rave scene and the protest scene, politics and culture. What Gorbachev at the time talked about, sort of art and politics is like bread, flour and yeast sort of thing. And so the idea was you would meet up at a central spot. In this case, I think it was Liverpool Street, and everybody got a different coloured hat to wear, or a different coloured, I think it was a mask, wasn't it? And according to the colour of your mask, you followed the flags.
That's right, man, yeah.
And so, people set off on bicycles, people set off on the Circle Line, on the Northern Line, the District Line, different ways, and obviously the police were following, but nobody knew where we were going except for 3 flag bearers. I wasn't there at the time. I was a part of a sort of the convoy in the area of Shepherd's Bush with stalls and food and sound systems and all this sort of thing. And we were weaving around the back streets, trying to avoid the Forward Intelligence Unit. Scully was a particular bastard's name. And we could sort of see as we were going around the block, they were going that way and we were going this way. And suddenly all these 3 phalanx, if you like, the bicyclists, 2 groups on the tube, arrived at Shepherd's Bush roundabout, the M41, to find a line of police across the motorway. And basically, they couldn't cover up the whole motorway. People went round the walls, the police lines thinned out, and we just piled through. And then a big curtain-sided truck managed to get through as well. We thought, oh, that looked a bit strange. Sides came back, bloody great sound system. I can't remember if it was DIY from Nottingham or wherever it was, but a fantastic, great sound system. And suddenly the atmosphere changed completely. The police realised they had completely lost the situation, and they stood around then of just sort of being observers while thousands and thousands of people took over the M41. And there was an amazing you might have seen the photograph, somebody in a huge sort of dress on stilts about 15 foot up in a beautiful white skirt. Zoe was on stilts for bloody hours. I don't know how she managed it. With this beautiful, huge, voluminous skirt. Underneath there was two guys with jackhammers digging through the M41. And of course, with the sound system going, you couldn't hear these jackhammers. But if you ever see Adrian Fisk's exhibition of photos from that stage, there is a great photo of this sort of voluminous skirt that was probably wider than the screen, and two really sweaty people underneath it with sort of bandanas and masks on this jackhammer. One of them just going like this to Adrian's carriage.
And what do they do in the hole?
We then planted a tree later on in the hole on the M41. It was a fantastic mixture of, as I say, politics, because the road protest scene then was massive. You know, we'd had Twyford Down, which we'd lost, but it really brought it into national attention, and that was probably the sort of the restarting of the British environmental movement. Where's it going with that?
Politics
But
and culture.
yes, and you know, and then Newbury, which wasn't just a protest camp. Newbury was like 13 different protest camps all the way along the line of the proposed road. And each camp had a very different atmosphere, because it was a tight village of people living up in tree villages, few people tunnelling. Some people ate roadkill, some people wouldn't touch dairy or were strictly vegan, some were flesh-eating meats in the Ewok village. It was an amazing variety of people who were then pushed together by Michael Howard's criminal justice bill. And that's where we formed up Freedom Network to try and unite all these groups, squatters, road protesters, ravers, football fans, anybody who wanted to assemble without the purpose of consuming essentially became illegal then, and especially if you wanted to enjoy yourself and have a party. Yeah. So we were really trying to unite the sort of rave movement, the culture that was changing so much in that time, and all the myriad protest scene. And that's what Freedom Network and Reclaim the Streets were trying to do.
Rock and roll! Come on! Okay, we're going forward in time, over to Louis McKechnie.
All right.
Getting very excited. I don't know why, for God's sake. It's like a circus or something. They'll bring the dolphins on in a minute.
Right. Next, two options again. A month sharing a prison cell with one of the biggest drug dealers in the country.
Yeah, that's great.
Yes.
Or, I haven't actually thought of another option yet, so I'm going to go with the first one. Right, so I think this was about 6 months into my last stint. I'd made a lot of friends, I had a lot of fun, I'd brewed a lot of hooch, the usual. This new guy moves onto the wing, he's like, this big deal or whatever, but no, I didn't really know why. But he came up to me and was like, hey, yo, listen, I just moved onto the wing. I'm looking for a good cellmate, and I was told you were the one to talk to. I was like, right, cool. My current cellmate doesn't speak English, so that works fucking perfectly. Move in with this guy. Instantly, 5 minutes into being in the cell, he hands me the biggest spliff I've ever seen. And this is like, weed's £100 a gram in prison, so I don't even know where he got it from. But, for a whole month in there, he's telling me these stories of shootouts in Spanish clubs, and flying to Colombia and coming back with hundreds of kilos of coke. And he's saying all this to me. I'm kind of nodding along, not really believing it, until he pulls out this smartphone. And so for a whole month, we're smoking spliffs together. I've got a smartphone. And he's telling me these stories of being chased over the border by armed militias in third world countries. And I'm thinking, it's all bullshit. And then I ask the other people on the wing, and they're like, yeah, it's true. And then he shows me all these pictures of him literally, running from, machine gun border security in I don't even remember what countries. But it was that moment I realised it doesn't really matter what background you come from, what you do. There is always a lot of middle grounds. Me, this, white middle class, relatively, normal-ish, I say ish, but, protester with one of the biggest drug dealers in the country. And I had the best month of my life.
Was he an Everton fan?
No, he wasn't. We didn't stop talking for 1 minute. Yeah, I do really miss him sometimes. I wish we kept in better contact.
All right. I'm going to try and be clever again. Actually. Do you know what? It's so weird sitting there because it's like I keep going, oh my God, there's this one. We should do this more because there's some really lovely stories. Yeah, you guys have got to hear about this one. So this is an innovation that was planned for about 6 months training, okay? And this was put together by a legend out there. He now is a big part of ZAD in America, in France, the Zone à Défendre. But if you don't know about this guy, you should look him up. His name's John Jordan, and he's been responsible for a lot of beautiful actions, very beautiful, creative actions. And he calls himself an artivist at times, which sounds quite poncy, but he's just so not a poncy guy. Him and Isa have been doing stuff for 30, 40 years. And he helped to reclaim the streets, right?
Yeah.
So John was very much part of reclaim the streets. So he's looking at the situation we often get ourselves in, where there's, we do a lot of the G8 and the G20. So, you'll find that there's a convergence whenever somewhere in the world there's a meeting of the G8 or the G20. So, the kind of power holders of the world. Very often there's a convergence from months before of activists from around the world who don't agree that power should be concentrated in the hands of a few, particularly those few. And so there was a really big one coming up in Scotland, the G8 in Scotland in 2005 this was, right? And John had looked at what happens in the past. So you are very often, same with the climate conferences as well. Very often there's, like I say, convergence centres where all the activists from around the world meet, like a huge squat, make their plans. And also you'll end up with situations which are like battle lines. There's shitloads of Judge Dreads, cops in riot gear, and depending on the country, they can look pretty frightening. Like in Copenhagen at the climate conference there were huge Danish Judge Dreads in full body armour. They were like terrifying, right? We're all quite little compared to them. Anyway, he knew that's how things often end up. Big battle lines. What can we do? So creativity and joy. Let's dissolve the violence and the aggression in the air. So John Jordan set up the Clown Army, ladies and gentlemen. The Clown Bloody Army, right? And they'd been training for 6 months, and then they kind of revealed their power at Gleneagles when we had the big anti-G8 movement in 2005. And this is what it bloody looked like, right? And there's film out there. He's popping in and out, but Jamie Lowe, he's been making films for 20 years, 30 years of all this stuff, and he can point us to this brilliant bit of footage, right? I saw them all in action, but there's one moment that captures it, right? So you basically have a shed load of cops in riot gear, it's like Asterix and Obelix. It's like all the bloody Romans all lined up, right, with their shields, okay? And then you have all the activists, a lot of people using black bloc techniques. There was a lot of Germans who were in our camp who were black bloc, right? They used black bloc tactics is the word. And so they would get up really early in the morning and be doing their exercises. Oh, yeah, like this. I mean, they took it really seriously, right? Anyway, so you got all these people ready, like rebels ready to have a ruck, right? And then all the police lined up like this. And then in between the lines comes the Clown Army, right? So this is a platoon from the Clown Army. So it's like they'd all go, this is how they behaved. They really had trained, right? So there's a dozen of them, right? In a sort of cohort shape, all with like clown paint, but they all have sort of army fatigues, but clown paint and clown noses and all this stuff. And so they'd march in between like this, holding one feather. One person in the middle had one feather above them. And he was going, we're invisible. They can't see us. Oh, we're invisible. And all the black bloc and all the cops going, what? What's going on? And one of the Clown Army women, famously, it's a really famous picture, she goes up to one of the police shields and draws a smiley face in lipstick and then kisses the mouth, right? It's a really lovely picture. But in this bit of footage, which really sums it up, right, you hear the cops going, what we do about the clowns, Sarge? really, it's really true, really happened, right? And then there's this pause, and the Sarge is going, tactical retreat, lads, tactical retreat. As though you got the, see the cops like slowly backing away from clowns. And Black Bloc as well are like, oh, well, there's no fight now. The energy changed. There's a piece of genius, the Clown Army, piece of genius. Let's take violence out of it. You know, the new world that we're fighting for, we have to leave anger in the past, right? So the Clown Army was a really good example of it, and I wanted to share it with you on this fine day. All right. So, what's great about this is there's no point in having a Q&A because we've got too many stories to tell, and we're not exactly imparting information you need clarified about. So, back over to the past, the wonderful, glorious past.
Oh,
Shane Collins.
God, I was going to beg for a Q&A because I'm slightly struggling to think of sort of another amusing story. But I think it's worth remembering our victories because let's face it, at the moment, things ain't looking good. You know, we are going to breeze over 1.5 degree with no problems whatsoever. In the Arctic and Siberia, northern Canada, it's already about 3 to 4 degrees hotter than average. There is no doubt that we are heading for very, very difficult times. And I think at best, you know, we have to acknowledge that the future is going to be shit, but what we can do is make it less shit. But it's worth, with that thought in mind, remembering the victories that we have had. You know, I talked a bit about Reclaim the Streets and in particular Twyford Down and Newbury. You know, we stopped the Conservatives' road building programme in the 90s. Okay, and that was at first 20 people at Twyford, which then grew into thousands and thousands of people by the time M11 had been evicted, and you know that took weeks and weeks, and people had been there for years squatting empty streets. You know, that was a huge, huge victory. And you know, I'm sure there's many people still around who were part of that. But fuck, you know, we won that. We lost a lot of battles along the way at Newbury, M11, and lots of other places. But we won that. The other success we had was GM foods.
Yeah.
You know, Britain is one of the few countries around the world that does not sell genetically modified food. You may occasionally see it on cooking oil if it's not properly sourced, and certainly animals get fed GM food, but in the shops we don't have GM food, and that is because people went around pulling up the test crops. You know, direct action, peaceful, but it was sabotaging all these test crops. So these companies, these big pharma companies, realised it wasn't going to work. Consequently, you know, we don't have GM food. So that was a little victory, a little victory.
Okay. All right.
And just to finish, the last one I mentioned earlier about, you know, why Britain's emissions are dropping, because we dumped coal and then moved on to renewables. And okay, it is offshore renewables, which is a problem because it is owned by huge, big generating companies. And, you know, as you know, every society depends on energy. And if you have a centralized energy system, you have everybody paying 200 or 300 or 400 quid a month to the big 6 energy companies. Okay, so if you have centralized power, you have centralized economics. And if you have centralized economics, you have centralized politics, because those energy companies then influence the government. And that's why, you know, feed-in tariffs for domestic solar panels stopped, because the big 6 energy companies had a word with the government. They didn't want to be losing business, and so feed-in tariffs stopped. And in about 3 or 4 years, about 800,000 properties in Britain took up the feed-in tariffs for solar panels. That meant that those individual houses, it was decentralised energy. You know, we are producing it ourselves with solar panels on the roof. That means we are keeping that money within the household, within the community. Okay, so that's decentralised power leading to decentralised economics, and decentralised economics leads to decentralised politics.
Yeah, right on.
You know, so that's why we need onshore wind. We need every freaking roof that faces south or west to have solar panels on it. But you know, those are 3 or 4 little victories, and we've got to keep that in mind when you think things look pretty grim in the future. We have won, and we can still continue winning. And also, yes,
fracking, thanks.
Fracking.
Yeah. All right, time for more from Louis.
Thank you.
Louis McKechnie!
All right, so this one I want to dedicate to a friend that passed away. Did any of you know Xavier?
Yeah, man. Yeah.
So this might be my favourite memory I have of Xavier. Actually, it's hard to pick. There's a fair few. But this was, we just finished the first wave of Just Stop Oil. We'd just done all the oil terminals. We fucked their shit up pretty well, if I do say so myself. But the media they hadn't paid much attention to us. So a few of us were sitting around afterwards thinking, all right, what can we do that will really make them have to pay attention to us? And I, over a pint, quite jokingly said, why don't we smash up a bunch of petrol stations? I don't know who these idiots were, but they kind of listened to me and we ended up doing it. And so, yeah, about a week later, we find ourselves at a petrol station. We show up, we tell all the drivers to leave. We take these glass-breaking hammers and we smash up all the pumps. 180 grand of criminal damage. It's a petrol station that was, yeah, there's 4 big petrol service stations on the M25. We did 2 of them at once, the 2 biggest. And so it was causing havoc. The media was like completely on it. We were the front page of everything. And so we smashed up all these pumps, and then we're like, all right, the police are coming now. We've done all the damage. Let's glue on so they can't start repairing it instantly. And it was me, Xavier, and I think 3 others at this site who did the smashing. And so we glue our hands down, and me thinking I'm going to be really smart, I'm like, the de-glue team's going to be quick, they want to get us cleared. I'm going to put 3 tubes of glue on my hand. So I put 3 tubes of glue on, thinking, oh, this is an amazing idea. And then I'm like, you know, a little bit time goes by, some police show up, still no protest removal team. I'm like, oh, I'm sure they'll be here soon. Cut to about 9 or 10 hours later. Still haven't fucking showed up. You know, people are ripping themselves off to go piss. Yeah. And I'm trying, but it's just not happening. And so I'm sitting next to Xavi, and I'm like, Xavi, listen, mate, how is this going to work out? And he's like, Louis, mate, just trust me, it'll be fine. And so we shout over to one of the support people, Storm, go get me a bottle out of that bin. Storm goes, gets me a bottle. I sort of angle it upright. And then just as I start pissing, police officer shouts, oi, at me. And I flinch, and it messes up the alignment, and it goes everywhere. And the problem is, it's not like I can go clear. I'm still stuck to the ground. And I've never seen Xavi laugh so hard in his life. I was stuck there for another 4 hours sitting in it, in waterproof trousers over the top of normal trousers. There was no escaping it. And Xavi, oh my God, I was honestly worried he might die of laughter. He laughed that hard at me.
Nice one.
Hey!
Hey, PB. Okay, we've got very little time left, so I'm going to just give you, I did mention to you earlier, and then we'll do our little goodbyes. Thanks, everybody, by the way. We've had a lovely time up here. But I mentioned the yes men, so this is culture jamming at its highest, and it's a really good thing to encourage it. Remember what I was saying. It's people who know, they look at how media works and they use it against itself, right? So I just want to give you a couple of the gigs. Look them up. They've done millions of brilliant things, but this is one that was remarkable. So in 1981, there was a horrific disaster in Bhopal in India where Union Carbide, they were called Union Carbide at the time, they didn't care about health and safety. So you know, their plant, their chemical plant, you know, exploded. Something like 18,000 people were terminally affected with the chemicals that came out. I think something like 6,000 people died that night, and it was horrific, right? And they wouldn't pay. So they were such a huge corporation. They go, well, you know, let's just tie, as they do, let's just tie them up in court cases for decades, okay? Anyway, about, I don't know, some years later, there's this amazing thing announced on news, right, on BBC One, and at the same time on CNN, right? There were and by then, Union Carbide had become Dow Chemicals. And there were representatives from Dow Chemicals contemporaneously on BBC across the Atlantic on CNN going, we are from Dow Chemicals. And we want today to be a landmark in corporate history because for the first time, we are going to take responsibility rather than tie people up in legal cases for decades. Despite the fact we've ruined their lives, we never give them anything. We're going to do that. So here I am today speaking for Dow Chemicals. We have been responsible for death and we're horrified at our lack of morals. And so today we are recognising that, we are admitting that, and we are going to support all those people in Bhopal, right? Now, which way around should I tell it? Okay, yeah, so you're all with me still, that's good. About 20 minutes later, by then the shares of Dow have absolutely plummeted by billions and billions. And by half an hour later, there's an emergency bit of news being pushed on CNN and BBC. And guess what it is? It's people from Dow Chemicals going, we don't know who they were, but they're not us. Now, that was the yes men doing it. Now, I can tell what a lot of you good-thinking people are thinking. That's pretty tough on Bhopal. No, it's not, because they had gone to Bhopal and they'd worked with all the people there saying, we are going to play this scam. And the people of Bhopal said, please do it because we've been forgotten. And Bhopal was profoundly remembered because of this action. So they pretended to be, so they got really good at pretending to, they pretend to be the World Trade Organization. They just set up their own website with a very similar URL, and they were being invited to places to talk about world trade as the WTO, even though they weren't. So the one that I'm going to leave you with is one where they turned up at a massive university, something like Yale or Stansted, right? And they no, that's an airport, Jamie. Never mind. They turned up at Yale. Yeah, my mama used to say from Tipperary, bless her soul, never ruin a story with the details, Jamie. So they turned up as WTO, Yale Business University, and you've got to see it. You can find this easy, right? And they've given out all these hamburgers at the start, free hamburgers. Everyone's eating these hamburgers, right? And they have this display. They're going, we at WTO have worked out an ingenious way of dealing with two problems in the same way, right? And which is, how do we kind of feed the global south, right? And also, how do we work out good waste disposal, better, more efficient waste disposal systems? And so they're showing it on the screen while everyone's eating the burgers. And you've got this cartoon, look, I'm standing up, I'm so excited. And you've got this cartoon that basically shows someone in the modern West going to the toilet, having a poo, and then the poo goes down these pipes and ends up in a factory, and the poo gets treated and becomes hamburgers, right? and then you can see on the film all these people going, so we've had an absolute ball with you lot, and we should do this again because there's loads more stories. But I want us, first of all, on a serious note, I'd just like us to give a cheer and an honour to Xavier, who is a friend of Louis, who passed away, who we all love very much. So let's have a big cheer for Xavier. And a great thank you. So Shane is responsible for so many beautiful things, particularly Green Gathering where we are. He's one of the main people who keeps this beautiful thing going. He's one of the original Reclaim the Streets people. He's been supporting, he was at the road protests, but he's also been supporting people like XR. He ran the Marble Arch camp. Pound on heart, fucking legends. Shane Collins! And a new, modern, beautiful legend, Louis McKechnie from Just Stop Oil!
And a bloody massive hand for Jamie Kelsey Fry, whose energy has uplifted us all for years.